Well, I think from the time I was a little boy, justice was always very important to me. I can speculate about where that came from, but you asked me about Robert Kennedy and Malcolm X, and I had pictures of those guys upstairs because they were two heroes of mine. And Robert Kennedy, I love that guy because I could see by just the way he was, when I would see a video clip of when he came out of a Native American's house or a ghetto situation, or talked about what was going on in this country and civil rights, I could tell it wasn't just talk. And so I really believed in that guy, and I believed that if he had become president, it would have made a huge difference in the history of the country. So when he was assassinated, I was working in his campaign that night. This was when I was a psychiatric resident in training, and that night in 1968, they gave me an assignment to go out to a little county in eastern Colorado. I was in Denver for my training, out where they grow beets without, dry farming, they call it. I didn't know anything about that. I'm a city kid. But I told them about why I liked Kennedy and why I hoped they would vote for him to get the nomination at that point. And I got back home to find he was dead, assassinated. So that was one of the biggest disappointments of my life. But at any rate, Malcolm X was a guy that I totally admired because I had read the biography, and I learned how he pulled himself up from being just a small-time hood, began to study the English language, began to become a very powerful speaker, and get more black people to realize that just being compliant and ask for help wasn't going to be good enough. Anyway, those are two of my heroes, and they were people who I think resonated with me around the question of justice, and I think your question was sort of going toward how I got so focused on that, and I'd be glad to talk about it if you want. Nobody's maybe too good about being their own psychoanalyst, so I don't know if my speculations about why I became obsessed or justice was always important, but I'll give you a few ideas. You're asking me about why that's been a central theme. I suspect the fact that I was a little kid and had an older brother, 3 years older, who I truly believe was pretty jealous because I was doing a lot of things well and he wasn't. And he had some physical issues with his eyes and glasses and stuff like that. And so I was a victim of some injustice from him. And I was also not only the youngest kid in that neighborhood in East Los Angeles that I grew up in, but I was small for my age. So being younger than the other kids, they were typically my brother's age, 3, 4 years older. It's a big difference when you're 5 or 6 and they're 9 or 10. So I grew up as a very intense little boy, and I was always very focused. I paid attention. So a lot of times I could do things as well as those bigger kids, maybe better, because I was focusing all the time. And I was a good athlete. I mean, not a world-class athlete, but I was good. So I could keep up with them, and I knew I could, but I had to demonstrate it because they'd look at me and they'd think, well, he's the last kid we're going to pick for the team or whatever. So I think I probably experienced some things where I wanted to make sure that I got a fair shake, and I had to, demonstrate it. And then I had some other experiences I remember I have told you about that were relevant, that one I remember, and this was when I was maybe in the 3rd grade, something like that. I had a very good friend who was, in those days we'd call him a gypsy. Now that's not as good a term. A much better term would be roam. That's what the people want to be called. And he was a very popular kid. Tony was his name. I remember his name that day, and he was a nice looking and a very good singer. I remember the girls absolutely loved him because he could sing so well. Well, my brother, the group that my brother and I hung around with, the older ones, they had this little football team they were starting. We played a lot of touch football. And I played when we did, but when they got this team, one day they said to me, well, Lee, you know, we don't think we can let you be on this team because you got this friend who's a gypsy. That was the term in those days. And they said to me, it bugs me to this day to think about it, they said to me, you know, you got to make up your mind. Either you stop being friends with him or you can't be on the team. And I was, like I said, about 7 or 8, and I agonized for a day because I really wanted to be on that team. You know, it was important. But I also knew it was wrong. I knew, sure as hell, they shouldn't be doing that. And I didn't care whether he was gypsy or not. So finally, after they left me hanging in the wind for a day, they said, oh, no, we're just kidding. You can be on the team. So stuff like that, whatever the reasons are, I think I have always resonated when I see an issue of unfairness like that. I get angry and determined to see if I should respond in some way. And that has been the thread, I think, that runs through my work in psychiatry, is the fact that psychiatry so often contributes to abuse of people. Not that individual psychiatrists are bad guys, bad women. It's not that. It's that society uses psychiatry to cover up a lot of things. And that my writing has been about that all the way through.